The coffee mug warmed my palms as I stood on the front porch, watching fat snowflakes drift down through the bare branches of the oak trees. Barnaby slept at my feet, his graying muzzle twitching with dreams, one ear pressed against the weathered boards. It was 9 inches the morning, and the silence of Oak Haven in winter was absolute, the kind of quiet that made you believe you could finally breathe. Then the engines shattered everything. 2 black SUVs and a massive U-Haul truck roared up the narrow lane, their tires spitting slush and gravel. They stopped hard at my wrought iron gate, engines still running, exhaust clouding the frozen air. My heart lurched into my throat. I was already running before the first door opened. Dad Declan stepped out of the lead SUV, adjusting his wool coat like he was arriving at a country club. That conqueror's smile. That same expression he'd worn when he convinced me to co-sign his business loan 6 years ago, the one I was still paying off. Then Felix jumped down from the truck's cab, already barking orders at 3 men in the back. "Careful with those server racks. Don't scratch the casings." He didn't even look at me. Didn't acknowledge my existence as he directed them to start unloading equipment right there on the curb, blocking the entire street. "What are you doing here?" My voice came out smaller than I intended. Barnaby had woken, pressing against my legs, a low whine building in his chest. Declan's smile widened. "Harper, sweetheart, we're home." Home. The word hit me like a fist. 2 years. 2 years of 80-hour weeks at the architectural conservation firm, nosebleeds from exhaustion, living on ramen and black coffee. 2 years of saving every cent of that $300,000 bonus so I could buy this place, Blackwood Manor, and register it under the Oak Haven Heritage Trust, to keep it anonymous, to keep them from finding me. I'd been so careful. I'd changed my phone number. I'd kept my address off every database. I'd even used a P.O. box, 4 towns over, for my mail. But I'd made one mistake. One stupid, arrogant mistake. 3 months ago, I'd posted a close-up photo of the Manor's rare rose window on an anonymous architecture forum. Just the window, no location tags, no identifying information. But the Oak Haven Historical Society had seen it, recognized it, and reshared it publicly on Facebook with the full address, gushing about the restoration of this local treasure. And my mother had Google alerts set up for my name, my old addresses, architectural terms I used in college papers, even the make of my car. She'd found me within hours. "How did you know I was here?" I managed, gripping the gate's iron bars. Declan pointed casually toward the tree line across the street. "I parked right over there for 14 hours yesterday. Watched you walk the dog at 7:30. Saw your Volvo in the drive. Saw you leave for the grocery store and come back alone." He tilted his head, studying me like I was a specimen. "I know you're all alone in this big house, Harper. That's no way to live." The calculation in his voice made my skin crawl. This wasn't a surprise visit. This was reconnaissance. This was tactical. "You need to leave," I said, forcing steel into my voice. "This is private property. You're not welcome here." Felix finally looked at me then, his expression somewhere between pity and contempt. "Harper, don't be dramatic. We're family." He gestured at the server racks being stacked on my curb. "And I've got a business to run. The lease is already signed." "What lease?" Declan pulled a folded document from his coat pocket, waving it like a flag of truce. "Felix is renting your basement. Very reasonable terms, $1 a month for 5 years. You signed it last month, remember?" The world tilted. "I never signed anything." "Your signature's right there, sweetheart." I didn't open the gate. I didn't move. Every instinct I'd spent 2 years rebuilding screamed at me that this was a trap, that opening that gate even an inch would be the end of everything. Declan's smile faded. He pulled out his phone. 20 minutes later, a locksmith's van pulled up. A middle-aged man in coveralls stepped out, toolbox in hand, and Declan intercepted him before he reached the gate. I watched through the bars as my father transformed, shoulders slumping, voice dropping to a concerned, paternal murmur. He showed the locksmith his ID, pointed at the last name we shared. "I'm her father," Declan said, loud enough for me to hear. "I live here. My daughter's having a mental health crisis. She's locked herself inside and won't let anyone in. We're worried sick about her." The locksmith glanced at me, then at Declan's kind, worried face. At Felix standing nearby, looking appropriately concerned. "I understand, sir," the locksmith said quietly. He approached the gate, drill in hand. "Miss, I'm going to need you to step back." "Don't you dare!" I shouted. "This is my property. He doesn't live here. He's lying." But the drill was already screaming, metal on metal, and the sound triggered something primal in Barnaby. The old dog started barking deep, terrified barks that tore at his throat. He'd come from a shelter, found wandering a highway with cigarette burns on his back. Loud machinery still sent him spiraling into panic. Felix's patience snapped. While the locksmith worked the front gate, my brother strode along the fence line to where the decorative iron dipped lower, half hidden behind overgrown forsythia bushes. He grabbed the top bar, hauled himself up and over with a grunt, and dropped into my yard. Barnaby lunged, trying to protect me, but his arthritic hips trembled with the effort. He hesitated for a split second, fear warring with loyalty. It was all the time Felix needed. His boot came up fast and brutal, catching the old dog square in the hip. Barnaby yelped a sound I'd never heard him make, high and agonized, and scrambled away from Felix's reaching hands. "Barnaby, no!" I screamed. But Felix had already reached the gate's interior latch. He twisted it, and the gate swung wide. Barnaby, terrified and hurting, bolted straight through the opening and out onto the road. The busy, icy road where cars came flying around the blind curve at 40 miles an hour. I didn't think. I ran. Behind me, I heard the SUV engines rev. Heard the truck's hydraulic lift whining. Heard Felix laughing as he waved the convoy through. By the time I reached Barnaby, shaking in a snowbank, eyes wild with fear, my family's vehicles were already rolling through my gate and up my drive. The occupation had begun. I stumbled back through the gate 15 minutes later, Barnaby trembling in my arms. He was too heavy for me to carry far, but I couldn't put him down, couldn't risk him running again. His hip joint clicked with each breath, and I felt the wetness of his tears soaking into my coat. Declan blocked my front door, that lease agreement now held up like a shield. "I'm glad you're back, Harper. Let's talk about this reasonably." He gestured toward the open door behind him, where I could hear heavy equipment scraping across my floors. "Felix is just setting up his operation in the basement. Very quiet, very professional. You won't even know we're here." I pushed past him, Barnaby still clutched to my chest. The oak door, my beautiful, restored oak door, stood wide open, letting in the cold. Snow was already melting on the original hardwood floors. "Get out," I said. "All of you. Get out of my house." Declan's expression shifted to something almost paternal. "Harper, I know you're upset, but look at this." He smoothed the lease document against the doorframe. "This is a legal agreement. Felix rents the basement for $1 per month, 5-year term. Your signature, your witness, everything properly notarized." I finally lowered Barnaby to the floor, my arms burning. The old dog immediately limped to the corner and collapsed, whimpering. I looked at the lease. The signature looked like mine. The notary stamp was crisp and official. The date was from 6 weeks ago, a Tuesday, when I'd been at a conservation conference in Boston. "This is forged," I said flatly. "I was in Boston that day. I never signed this." "That's not what the document says." "I don't care what it says. It's fake, and you know it." Felix emerged from the basement door, wiping dust from his hands onto his jeans. He was holding a voltage meter. "What are you doing down there?" I demanded. "Just checking the load capacity," Felix said, his voice dismissive. "Old houses have terrible wiring. I need to make sure the circuits can handle the rigs." I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. "Oak Haven Police?" The dispatcher answered. "I need an officer at Blackwood Manor immediately. I have intruders who broke into my home and assaulted my dog. They're refusing to leave." Declan didn't even flinch. He just folded the lease back into his pocket and smiled. The wait for the police felt like hours, though it was barely 30 minutes before Sheriff Brody's cruiser crunched up the gravel drive. He was a tall man in his 50s, with the weathered face of someone who'd spent decades refereeing small-town disputes. I met him at the door, still holding Barnaby's collar to keep him from trying to follow me outside in his panic. "Thank you for coming, Sheriff. These people broke into my home." "Now, hold on." Brody raised a hand, his voice calm and measured. He looked past me at Declan, who had positioned himself in the foyer like he owned the place. "Sir, are you a resident here?" Declan produced the lease with a flourish. "My son Felix rents the basement. This is a legal tenancy agreement. Signed by the property owner, my daughter, Harper Lawson. Brody took the document, studied it carefully, looked at the signature, the notary seal, the terms. Miss Lawson, is this your signature? No, it's forged. I've never rented anything to anyone. This is my home, and they have no legal right to be here. The sheriff's expression shifted, not unsympathetic, but resigned. Ma'am, I understand your frustration, but this appears to be a civil matter. Your brother has a lease agreement that appears valid on its face. I'm not a handwriting expert, and I'm not a judge. If this signature is fraudulent, you'll need to prove that in civil court and go through the formal eviction process. Eviction? Sheriff, they kicked my dog. They broke in here with bolt cutters. Did anyone witness the alleged assault on the animal? I opened my mouth, then closed it. I'd been out on the road when Felix kicked Barnaby. The locksmith had been focused on the gate. It was Felix's word against mine. I felt the ground shifting under me. This wasn't about justice. This was about procedure, technicalities, the difference between civil and criminal law. Declan smiled at the sheriff. Officer, I think my daughter just needs some time to adjust to the new arrangement. Family can be complicated. I looked at Barnaby, limping and whimpering in the corner. At Felix, grinning from the basement doorway. At my father, playing the reasonable patriarch. And I realized, the law was being weaponized to protect the people hurting me. Fine, I said quietly. Sheriff, thank you for your time. Brody tipped his hat, clearly relieved to escape the domestic minefield. You folks work this out, and please, keep it civil. As Brody turned to leave, I pulled out my phone. My contacts list still had them all. Mom, Dad, Felix. I scrolled past those and found the number Sterling Vane had given me when he'd helped me set up the Oakhaven Heritage Trust. I put Sterling on speakerphone so Declan could hear every word. My lawyer's voice filled the foyer, precise and cutting. Mr. Lawson, Sterling said, his tone cordial but edged with steel. I'm sure you're aware that Harper Lawson is not the legal owner of Blackwood Manor. The property is held in trust by the Oakhaven Heritage Trust, a registered nonprofit entity. Harper is the trustee, not the owner. Declan froze. Sterling continued. Which means that lease agreement, the one with Harper's signature, is invalid regardless of its authenticity. Harper cannot rent property she doesn't personally own. Any rental agreement would need to be executed by the trust itself, with proper board approval and documentation. I watched my father's face cycle through confusion, anger, and finally calculation. Furthermore, Sterling added, if that signature is forged, as Harper claims, then you've used fraudulent documents to gain access to trust property. That's not a civil matter, Mr. Lawson. That's criminal trespass on a nonprofit entity, a felony in this state. Felix's grin vanished. Dad, what's he talking about? Declan held up a hand, silencing him. This is a family misunderstanding. I'm not confused, I said softly. Sheriff Brody? The sheriff had paused on the porch. He turned back, his expression hardening as he processed the lawyer's words. Trespassing on a trust was a different beast entirely. Mr. Lawson, Brody said, stepping back inside. If you cannot prove you have an agreement with the trust, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises until this is verified by a court. Declan's mask slipped. For just a moment, I saw the rage underneath. You're making a mistake, Harper, he said quietly. Family is supposed to help each other. Tell your lawyer that, I replied. The heavy clouds made the day feel older than it was as they loaded back into their vehicles. They would be heading to the Motel 6 Inches town. Felix paused at the threshold, giving me one last look. Enjoy the darkness, little sister. I didn't understand what he meant until I closed the door and locked it. Silence returned to the house, but something was wrong. The hum of the refrigerator was gone. The thermostat display in the hallway was blank. I ran to the basement. The main breaker panel was open. Felix hadn't just checked the capacity. He had severed the main feed wires to the furnace and the kitchen circuit. He'd sabotaged the heating system before the sheriff even walked in the door. I wrapped myself in blankets and sat on the floor next to Barnaby, both of us shivering. Outside, the temperature dropped to -3 degrees. Inside, I deleted Mom and Dad from my emergency contacts and saved Sterling Vane to my favorites. The battle had just begun. The house felt like a tomb. I woke on the second day, wrapped in 3 blankets on the living room sofa, my breath clouding in the frigid air. Barnaby was pressed against my legs, shivering despite the old quilt I'd tucked around him. The Victorian radiators stood silent and cold, the elaborate ironwork now just decorative coffins for a heating system Felix had murdered. I'd called 4 electricians the night before. 3 hadn't answered. The 4th had listened to my description of the damage and said he couldn't come until after New Year's, a week away. Everyone was booked, or gone, or unwilling to drive out to Oakhaven in the snow for an emergency call. So I sat in the cold and did the only thing I could. I documented everything. Photos of the electrical panel, wires hanging like severed arteries, close-ups of Barnaby's hip, the bruising now dark purple beneath his fur. Screenshots of the property deed showing the Oakhaven Heritage Trust as the legal owner, the forged lease agreement, photographed from every angle. I was uploading the files to a secure cloud drive when my phone rang. Unknown number. Miss Lawson? A woman's voice, professional and irritated. This is Patricia Newell from Oakhaven Electric. I'm calling about the account transfer request we received this morning. My fingers froze on the keyboard. I didn't request any transfer. Our records show a request, submitted at 8:47 a.m., to transfer the account for Blackwood Manor from your name to Felix Lawson. The caller provided your social security number for verification. Ice flooded my veins, and not from the temperature. That wasn't me. Someone's committing identity fraud. A pause. I see. Can you verify your social security number now? I did, and heard Patricia's typing accelerate. All right, Miss Lawson. I'm flagging this as fraudulent and reversing the transfer. You'll want to file a police report immediately. Whoever called us this morning had access to your personal information. After I hung up, I sat staring at my phone. Felix didn't have my social security number. I'd never shared it with him. But Mom did. Mom had co-signed my student loans. Mom had my SSN memorized, written in her precise handwriting in the family records she kept. And she'd just handed it to Felix to commit utility fraud, to manufacture proof of residency, to build his fraudulent claim to my home. I called Sterling Vane. Harper, he answered immediately. I've been expecting your call. I saw the social media posts. What posts? He sighed. Your mother has been active on Facebook since yesterday evening. According to her narrative, you've kicked your elderly parents out into the cold, refused to let your brother operate his legitimate business, and are having some kind of breakdown. She's rallying quite a bit of sympathy. I pulled up Facebook on my laptop. Mom's page was public, and she'd been busy. Heartbroken tonight, her latest post read. My daughter has locked us out of the family home in this freezing weather. We've tried everything to reach her, but she's not well. Please keep Harper in your prayers. Sometimes mental illness makes people turn against those who love them most. 300 reactions. 87 comments, most expressing concern and sympathy. I closed the laptop before I could read the comments. Harper? Sterling's voice pulled me back. Are you still there? They're lying about everything. I know, which is why we're going to hit them with everything we have. His tone shifted to something razor sharp. The utility fraud gives us ammunition. I want you to file a police report immediately for identity theft. Then we're filing a complaint with the FTC. This isn't just about your house anymore. Felix just committed a federal crime. Will it be enough? It's a start. But Harper, I need you to understand something. Your family is fighting dirty because they're desperate. Felix was evicted from his last place 6 months ago. He owes over $8,000 in back rent. Your parents' credit is destroyed. They're out of options, out of money, and they see your house as their last chance. So what do? You become a fortress. Every move they make, we counter. Every lie they tell, we document. And most importantly, we make them radioactive. He paused. Have you considered going public? Public how? The Oakhaven Zoning Board meets virtually tomorrow morning. I'm filing an emergency complaint tonight. Felix wants to run a crypto mining operation and industrial facility in a Class A historic district. That's a direct violation of preservation codes. I felt something shift in my chest, not quite hope, but close. They'll shut him down? They'll blacklist him. And more importantly, it'll be a matter of public record. Your mother wants to play the sympathy game? Let's show the town exactly what kind of business Felix is really running. After we hung up, I made the calls. First to the Oakhaven Police Department, filing a formal identity theft report. Then to the Federal Trade Commission, documenting the utility fraud. Each form I filled out, each case number I received, felt like laying bricks in a wall between me and them. I was heating soup on a camp stove, the only way to cook without power, when my phone buzzed with a text from an old college friend who still lived in town. Harper, heads up. Saw your brother and dad at Clarkson's Hardware this afternoon. They were buying bolt cutters and asking about gate locks. Looked intense. You okay? My hand tightened on the phone. Bolt cutters. They were planning another breach. But this time, they wouldn't have the excuse of a mental health emergency or a fake lease to hide behind. This time, it would be pure, undeniable criminal trespass. I forwarded the text to Sterling, then walked through the dark, freezing house to check every lock, every window. Barnaby limped after me, whining softly, sensing my fear. It's okay, boy, I whispered, running my hand over his graying head. We're going to be okay. But I wasn't sure I believed it. Outside, the wind howled through the bare trees. Snow began to fall again, thick and heavy, and my family was buying bolt cutters. The Oakhaven Zoning Board met via video conference the next morning at 10 a.m. I sat in my freezing living room, laptop balanced on my knees, watching the gallery of faces populate the screen. Sterling appeared in his own window, dressed in a suit despite working from home. Agenda Item 7. The board chair announced. A stern woman named Margaret Rhodes. Emergency preservation complaint regarding 1847 Blackwood Manor, filed by Sterling Vane on behalf of the Oakhaven Heritage Trust. Sterling unmuted himself. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be brief. We've received credible intelligence that Felix Lawson intends to operate a commercial cryptocurrency mining facility from the basement of Blackwood Manor, a Class A historic property in a residential preservation district. This operation would involve industrial electrical demands, heat generation, and 24-hour mechanical noise, all of which violate Section 12.3 of the town's Historic Preservation Code. One of the board members leaned forward. Has Mr. Lawson applied for commercial permits? No, sir. He attempted to enter the property using fraudulent lease documentation and has made no effort to comply with any commercial zoning requirements. Margaret Rhodes' expression hardened. Does Mr. Lawson wish to address this complaint? Silence. Felix and Declan weren't on the call. They'd probably never even known about the meeting. Very well. The board will issue an emergency, cease and desist order effective immediately. Any attempt by Felix Lawson to operate a commercial enterprise from Blackwood Manor will result in daily fines of $1,000 and potential criminal charges for zoning violations. She looked directly into the Pravasad. Camera. Mr. Vane, please forward this order to the Oakhaven Police Department for enforcement. Thank you, Madam Chair. The meeting continued, but I'd stopped listening. The fortress wall had just grown higher. By evening, Felix knew. I discovered this when my phone exploded with notifications, all from the private messages Tiffany, his girlfriend who, helping them from the shadow, was broadcasting on her Instagram. Felix, the town just blacklisted me. My sister destroyed everything. Felix, we can't stay at the motel anymore. My card got declined. We're out of money. Felix, this is your fault. You had to go psycho with the lawyers. I screenshot every message and sent them to Sterling. Then I did something I'd never done before. I went on offense. There was a local blogger in Oakhaven, a retired journalist named Linda Mercer who ran a community news site. She covered everything from town meetings to local business disputes, and she had a reputation for being thorough and fair. I sent her an email. Miss Mercer, my name is Harper Lawson, and I'm the trustee of the Oakhaven Heritage Trust, which owns Blackwood Manor. I wanted to make you aware of a situation that may be of interest to your readers. I attached the zoning board decision, Felix's eviction records from his previous rental public record, easily searchable, and the police report I'd filed for identity theft. My family has attempted to seize control of a historic property using forged documents and fraudulent utility transfers. They've been blocked by the zoning board, but I thought the community should be aware of the situation. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Linda replied within 2 hours. Harper, I'd like to speak with you on the record. Are you available tomorrow morning? But tomorrow was still too far away. That night, as I sat bundled in blankets with Barnaby curled against my side, I heard a vehicle pull up outside. Just one, moving slowly, headlights off. I crept to the window and peered through the heavy curtains. Declan's SUV, idling at the end of the driveway, watching the house. After 10 minutes, it drove away. They were reconnoitering again. Planning. I pulled out my phone and called Chase, the archaeologist from the Historical Society who'd been helping with the Manor's garden restoration. We'd worked together on several projects over the past year, and he'd proven himself to be quiet, competent, and trustworthy. Chase, I need a favor. It might sound strange. Try me. His voice was calm, unbothered by the late hour. I explained the situation. Not all of it, but enough. The family, the fake lease, the threats. I think they're going to try to break in again. Soon. And I need to make sure this gate holds. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He arrived with his truck bed full of tools and materials. Together, we reinforced the gate discreetly, adding internal braces that wouldn't be visible from the street, installing a heavy-duty padlock that couldn't be drilled easily. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would telegraph our preparations. Harper, he said as we worked, his breath fogging in the cold. You know you don't have to face this alone, right? I looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in months. The steady hands, the careful attention to detail, the way he'd dropped everything to help me without asking questions. Thank you, I said quietly. I mean it. If you need anything. Actually, I interrupted, an idea crystallizing. There's something. New Year's Eve. Are you free? By the next morning, Linda Mercer's article was live on her site. Historic property dispute turns ugly. Family accused of fraud and zoning violations. The piece was scrupulously fair. She'd even reached out to Declan for comment, though he'd declined, but the facts spoke for themselves. Felix's eviction history, the forged lease, the zoning board ruling, all laid out in clean, verifiable detail. The comments section filled within 1 hour. The town's sympathy for my homeless family evaporated as people realized what was actually happening. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You're going to regret this. We're family. You don't destroy family. I forwarded it to Sterling and Sheriff Brody. Then I started making other calls, quiet calls, to the mayor's office, to the president of the Historical Society, to carefully selected members of Oak Haven's small but influential social circle. I'm hosting a small New Year's Eve gathering. I told each of them. Nothing fancy, just close friends. I'd be honored if you could join me. Every single one accepted. I gave them all specific instructions. Park at the rear entrance. Come in through the garden gate. Keep it quiet. The front of the house needed to look abandoned. Chase helped me prep the interior. We brought in a piano player, a small catering setup, enough champagne for 30 people. On New Year's Eve morning, Tiffany posted one final video. She was standing outside the Motel 6, Felix visible in the background loading suitcases into the truck. This is it, you guys, she said, her voice shaking. We're officially homeless. Felix's evil sister has destroyed us, but we're not giving up. Tonight we're going to reclaim what's rightfully ours. Justice will be served. I watched the video 3 times, memorizing every detail. Then I called Sheriff Brody. Sheriff, I have reason to believe my family will attempt to break into Blackwood Manor tonight. I have video evidence of them threatening to reclaim the property, and a witness who saw them purchase bolt cutters. I'm formally requesting police presence. There was a long pause. Miss Lawson, I'll be attending your New Year's gathering as a guest, but I'll have my badge with me. If anything happens, we'll handle it appropriately. Thank you, Sheriff. The trap was set. New Year's Eve arrived with brittle, crystalline cold. I'd finally gotten the heating system repaired. It had cost $4,000 to fix the damage Felix caused, and Blackwood Manor was warm again for the first time in a week. I kept the heavy velvet curtains drawn tight in the front rooms. Not a sliver of light could escape to the street. From outside, the house had to look empty. Guests arrived throughout the afternoon, all through the back entrance as instructed. The mayor and his wife, the president of the Historical Society. Sheriff Brody in a suit, though his badge was clipped to his belt. Local architects, preservationists, and a few of the wealthier donors who supported historic properties in town. Chase had helped me set up the great room warm lamps, a string quartet playing in the corner, catering stations with elegant finger foods. It looked like a scene from a Gilded Age party, all the more surreal given what I knew was coming. Are you sure about this? Chase asked quietly, handing me a glass of champagne I had no intention of drinking. It's not too late to just call the police now. I'm sure. I looked around the room at the assembled crowd, people of influence, witnesses, the exact opposite of what Felix expected to find. They need to face consequences. Real consequences. And for that to happen, they need to commit a crime that can't be explained away as a civil matter. At 11:30 p.m., I positioned myself near the curtained front windows, creating a small gap to watch. Most of the guests were mingling in the great room, unaware of what I was anticipating. The string quartet played something soft and elegant. Crystal clinked against crystal. It was perfect. Then I saw them. 2 vehicles, headlights off, rolling slowly up the lane. They parked at the tree line across the street, just visible in the ambient glow of the streetlights. I watched 3 figures emerge: Declan, Felix, and Tiffany, her phone already up and recording. They're here, I said quietly. Chase appeared at my shoulder, and Sheriff Brody casually drifted closer, his hand resting near his badge. The mayor noticed the shift in energy and moved to the window. Harper, what's happening? Watch. Felix led the approach, bolt cutters gleaming in his hands. Tiffany walked beside him, phone held high, live streaming to her followers. It's 11:45 on New Year's Eve, she announced breathlessly to the camera. We're about to reclaim justice. Felix's sister has been illegally keeping him from his property, but that ends tonight. Watch this, you guys. This is what standing up for yourself looks like. They reached the gate. Felix examined the reinforced lock, the one Chase and I had installed, and positioned the bolt cutters. The blades bit into the metal with a sharp crack that echoed across the frozen yard. The lock fell away. Felix kicked the gate open, the iron clanging against the stone post. Then he strode up the walkway toward my front door, Declan and Tiffany trailing behind. Harper! Felix's voice boomed across the property. I know you're in there. This is my house now. You can't hide anymore. He reached the oak door, my beautiful, painstakingly restored oak door, and kicked it. Once, twice. The frame held. But on the third kick, the lock mechanism gave way and the door crashed inward. Felix stormed into the entryway, bolt cutters still gripped in one hand, his face red with rage and triumph. Harper, there's nowhere to... He froze. The entryway was flooded with warm golden light from the great room beyond, and standing there, champagne glasses in hand, were 30 of Oak Haven's most prominent citizens. The room fell into a terrified silence. Guests lowered their glasses, stepping back as the front door shuddered under the blows. The string quartet had stopped playing abruptly. Felix stood there, panting, the bolt cutters looking obscene in the elegant room. He stared at the mayor, at the Historical Society president, at the town's wealthiest donors, and at Sheriff Brody, whose hand was now resting openly on his badge. The only sound was Tiffany's phone still recording, still live streaming this entire catastrophic miscalculation to her 18,000 followers. Felix Lawson, Sheriff Brody said, setting down his champagne glass and stepping forward. His voice was calm, almost gentle. You're under arrest. I have a lease. You have forged documents. You have a zoning board cease and desist order. And now you have just committed breaking and entering with burglary tools in front of 36 witnesses? Brody pulled his handcuffs from his belt. This is no longer a civil matter. Declan tried to step forward, to play the mediator, his hands raised in a placating gesture. Officer, please, this is just a family misunderstanding. Mr. Lawson, Brody interrupted. I have arrest warrants for you as well. Forgery, conspiracy to commit fraud, identity theft. Step over here, please. I stood on the landing of the grand staircase, looking down at them. Felix's eyes found mine, and for a moment I saw something almost like desperation. Harper, please. We're family. You can't do this. Mr. Declan Lawson, I said quietly, my voice carrying in the sudden silence. Please direct all future communications to my attorney. 2 more squad cars pulled up outside, lights flashing red and blue across the snow. 4 officers entered through the broken doorway. Felix was handcuffed first, breaking and entering. Criminal trespass. Possession of burglary tools. Animal cruelty from the incident with Barnaby. The identity theft charge from the utility fraud. Declan was next. Forgery. Conspiracy. Fraud. Tiffany stood in the doorway, still holding her phone. watching it all unfold on her own live stream. The comments were scrolling past faster than she could read them, but I could see her face going pale as she realized what she'd just broadcast. She looked at Felix, at the handcuffs, at the watching crowd. I didn't know. Felix, you said this was legal. You said. Tiffany, don't. Felix started, but she was already backing away. We're done, she said flatly. I'm not going down with you. She turned and ran for the gate, her phone still broadcasting her escape. Sheriff Brody walked Felix and Declan outside, reading them their rights in the cold night air. I watched from the doorway as they were loaded into separate squad cars, blue lights painting the snow. Felix looked back once, his expression unreadable through the window. Then the cars pulled away, tires crunching on ice, and they were gone. The mayor cleared his throat behind me. Harper, I'm so sorry you had to go through this. I turned back to the gathered crowd, to the concerned faces, and the quiet conversations. Thank you all for being here. I know this wasn't the New Year's celebration you expected. On the contrary, the Historical Society president said, raising her glass. I think we just witnessed justice. To Harper Lawson, and to Blackwood Manor. The others raised their glasses. To Harper. Chase was at my side then, his hand gentle on my shoulder. Are you okay? I looked around at the broken door, the scattered snow melting on my floors, the bolt cutters lying in my entryway like a discarded weapon. Then I looked at the people filling my home, not invaders, but guests I'd chosen. People who'd stood witness to my stand. Yes, I said, and realized I meant it. I'm okay. Outside, midnight struck. Somewhere in the distance, fireworks began to bloom against the winter sky. The siege was over. 5 months later, spring came to Oakhaven. The gardens of Blackwood Manor erupted in color tulips and daffodils pushing through the thawed earth, dogwood trees unfurling white blossoms against a sky so blue it hurt to look at. The heavy snow was a memory now, replaced by warm breezes that carried the scent of lilacs through open windows. I sat in the garden with a cup of tea, my laptop balanced on a wrought iron table, reviewing restoration proposals for the carriage house. But the work didn't feel urgent anymore. Didn't feel like survival. It felt like what it was supposed to be, a labor of love. A project I chose because I wanted to, not because I was running from something. Barnaby lay in a patch of sunlight near my feet, his gray muzzle resting on Chase's boots. The old dog's hip had healed well, though he still limped on cold mornings. But the fear was gone. The flinching when men approached, the panic at loud noises, all of it had gradually faded over the winter months. Now he slept peacefully while Chase worked, carefully brushing dirt from a fragment of pottery he'd found near the old garden wall. Looks like Wedgwood, Chase murmured, holding the piece up to the light. Probably 1,880 seconds, given the pattern. Your Victorian-era residents had good taste. They also buried their trash in the flower beds, I pointed out. He grinned. Archaeologists call that enriching the historical record. I smiled, watching him work. Over the winter, as the legal aftermath of New Year's Eve had played out, Chase had become a constant presence. Not intrusive, never pushing, just there. Helping me repair the front door, bringing coffee when I had to give depositions, sitting with Barnaby when I needed to meet with lawyers. Somewhere along the way, colleague had shifted to friend, and then to something that didn't have a clean label yet, something that made me feel safe instead of trapped. The brass plaque on the front gate caught the sunlight, its engraving sharp and clear. Property of Oakhaven Heritage Trust. By invitation only. Not. I'd had it installed in February, after the criminal trials concluded. Felix had pleaded guilty to avoid a longer sentence, 18 months in minimum security, plus restitution and probation. Declan had tried to fight the forgery charge, but the evidence was overwhelming. He got 2 years. Mom had never been charged. She'd claimed ignorance, said she'd just been trying to help her son, that she didn't know the documents were forged or that Felix planned to commit fraud. The prosecutors hadn't been able to prove otherwise, but she'd stopped calling. Stopped posting on Facebook about her ungrateful daughter. The silence from her was more telling than any conviction could have been. I'd blocked her number anyway. Some bridges weren't worth maintaining. Harper? Chase's voice pulled me back. He was watching me with that careful expression he got when he thought I was drifting into dark thoughts. You okay? Yeah, I closed my laptop. I was just thinking about how different things are now. Good different? I looked around the garden at the blooming flowers, at Barnaby sleeping peacefully, at the manor standing solid and warm behind us. At Chase, with dirt under his fingernails, and pottery shards scattered across his work cloth, looking at me like I was something worth protecting. Very good, different. He smiled. His hand found mine across the table, fingers intertwining. Then he went back to his excavation work. A car passed on the road beyond the gate, some tourist, probably, drawn by the Historical Society's new walking tour that featured Blackwood Manor as a preservation success story. I didn't tense anymore when I heard engines. Didn't rush to check who was arriving. The gate was locked. The alarms were set. And more importantly, I'd learned the difference between being isolated and being protected. I'd learned how to build boundaries without apology. I'd learned that family wasn't defined by blood, but by who showed up when you needed them, who respected your no, who celebrated your victories without demanding a cut of the spoils. Barnaby shifted in his sleep, his paws twitching with dreams that no longer seemed like nightmares. Chase hummed softly as he worked, some old folk song I didn't recognize but found comforting anyway. The afternoon sun warmed my shoulders, and for the first time in years, maybe in my entire life, I felt something I'd almost forgotten existed. Peace. Not the fragile, temporary peace I'd tried to buy by appeasing people who saw me as an ATM. Not the anxious peace of hiding and hoping I wouldn't be found. Real peace. The kind that came from knowing I'd fought for something and won. The kind that came from choosing who I let through my gates and who I kept out. The kind that came from finally understanding that protecting myself wasn't selfish, it was necessary. I squeezed Chase's hand, and he squeezed back, his eyes crinkling with a smile even as he focused on his work. Behind us, Blackwood Manor stood sentinel, its windows gleaming in the spring light. No longer a fortress under siege, a home, my home. And this time, the gate that protected it was there not to hide fear, but to shelter the happiness I'd built inside.